This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. With Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
I'll touch my V-neck sweater. 1 and 2 and a 1, 2, 3.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on 107.5 The Game, Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you, Chris Clark. Taking the week off. We will see him back next weekend. I hope everybody had a wonderful Easter weekend. Hopefully you stayed dry as well. Wes, I wrapped up the last hour talking about that weird story about the Rocket City Trash Pandas and the Chattanooga Lookouts, with the Lookouts winning 7-5 despite getting no hit. And you said you had something related to this story?
I do. By the way, first of all, elite names.
Oh, wonderful.
Love the minor league baseball names, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Always good. But, yeah, so when I was in high school, actually my first ever job was working for the rec center in York, South Carolina. So doing a little bit of everything, running the scoreboard, you know, picking up trash, a little bit of maintenance stuff, sometimes having to work concessions. Perfect first job,
sure,
basically. And so we actually hosted the girls softball U.S. championships in York and Rock Hill.
Okay.
So elite teams, and a lot of these teams had pitchers that were just ridiculously good.
Sure.
And I don't remember the actual outcome to this game, but I had a game that I was running a scoreboard for where the game went into extra innings.
Yep.
And at one point, and I don't know if they ended up losing the game. I think they did. But at one point, a girl had a perfect game by all other metrics, but was losing the game because they put the ghost runner on second in extra innings.
Wow.
So, you know, you can have a no-hitter and give up runs,
right,
but you lose the perfect game the second you have a walk,
right,
you know, hit by pitch or whatever. But
wow.
I don't know, does it, I mean, I guess technically it has to stop counting as a perfect game if you've given up a run, but she gave up no hits at all. They bunted the runner over.
Yeah.
And then there's a sacrifice fly or something, basically non-hit, non-walk to score that run. So they were down 1-0
despite
in
giving
extra
up no
innings.
hits.
Gave up no hits, no walks, no hit by pitch, nothing.
That's crazy.
And I was like, that can't have happened.
That's a rare one.
Very often at all.
Like I said, the stat line for that minor league game, I'd be hard-pressed to find one any weirder than that, but that's a good one.
Yeah, but, I mean, the minor league, when you start hitting people and walking, I mean...
Hit 3 batters in a row.
Yeah, sounded like LSU's pitchers on Thursday.
Yeah. Now, LSU turned things around on Friday a little bit, and if I would have told you going into last weekend that South Carolina and LSU were only going to play 2 games, and you're going to split it 1-1, you would have felt pretty good about that, right? Like, yeah, that sounds about right. Feel like that's about what it should be. But when you're up at South Carolina 4-0 at one point and then 7-3 in the 8th inning, thinking, man, we're going to get 2 of these games and probably not going to play a third game, a 2-game sweep at LSU. And then it all falls apart in the last couple of innings. And you're like, oh, what could have been?
Yeah, I think you have to have some perspective on it. But at the same time, I can see why you're pretty disappointed if you're a Carolina fan. Like, it was there for the taking.
Yep.
It really was. And here's the thing about giving up that grand slam. The way it got set up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's free bases, putting people on when you have a 4-run lead. That is generally one of those things that the baseball gods, so to speak, will punish you for. And, you know, you always see it if you have a big lead like that. The approach is, look, throw strikes, make them earn it. I know this is a really good hitting LSU team. There's still a chance they can come back. There's nothing that's a given.
Right.
But you had controlled really all 9 innings of the game before, and then, you know, right up to 7 innings of this game as well. So you felt like you've controlled the entire series, and then to give it up like that and then give up the additional run, you know, next inning to lose the game was, I mean, that's tough. And then, you know, you kind of want to be like, all right, bounce back, go win game 3, show your resolve, show what you're made of, and then, oh, it rains for 48 hours straight, and you don't get that opportunity. So LSU leaves, I mean, they stole the game. They are complete. I don't want to say they're lucky, because credit to them for executing, hitting the grand slam, you know, to put you up.
Sure.
But, man, missed opportunity is the words that come to mind for that for South Carolina. And, you know, now the positive side of that is you also, big picture, you leave that saying, I belonged on the field with the, quote, number 1 team in the country. Now, another layer to this, Tyler, I didn't feel like all weekend LSU looked like the number 1 team in the country. I thought didn't play a clean couple of games defensively.
Mm-hmm.
You had miscues with guys not covering third on a bunt on Friday. You see why they are as highly ranked as they are, and that's because they have a batting lineup that is very potent, and then they have some frontline pitchers, and they have a couple of bullpen arms that are elite. But I also thought we saw the cracks in, like, we saw their weaknesses as well. They, to me, don't look like a number 1 team.
And you mentioned that powerful top of the lineup. I think I counted between the 2 games. South Carolina was able to keep the first 5 batters in check for only a total of, I think, 6 hits, one of those being that grand slam, obviously. So you certainly held them down more than other teams did, which is a testament to your pitching staff, obviously. Now, the big question, and again, it's easy to kind of look at this hindsight being 2020. Cade Austin was on the mound in that 8th inning when you give up that grand slam. He's the one that got him into that situation with the bases loaded jam. Coach Kingston, after the game, was very adamant, like, hey, Austin's been here before. We have faith in him. We thought he was going to be able to get out of it. He didn't. But, and again, this situation didn't work out for you. But I feel like for Austin, knowing that they have that trust in him is, I don't want to say almost better, but reassuring, as opposed to if they would have pulled him out there saying, well, we don't think you can get yourself out of this situation.
Yeah, it's very easy, and I certainly welcome any fan to second guess it if they want, but at the same time, I think it's very easy after the fact to say, hey, you should have pulled him. He clearly did not look himself. He was off.
Sure.
But I think you want to show complete confidence in your guy. And frankly, you know, Carolina had been coming up aces all week long to that point. You sort of, I don't know, watching the game, you know, in the stadium, when they loaded the bases, I felt it didn't feel like there was any urgency in the stadium of, oh, we're about to blow this.
Sure.
And then as soon as the ball left the bat, you could just feel I don't want to say the energy go out of the stadium, but it definitely flattened the crowd. And you're just like, did that really just happen?
Yeah.
And, so I certainly get wanting to let your guy work out of his own jam, especially if he's going to be one of your guys for the rest of the year. And, also, I think we kind of saw some people questioned going to one of your top arms with a big lead the night before.
Yep.
I think this opens up two different scenarios there. Does that change if you had saved one more arm? Does that change how you would have used things on Friday?
Yeah.
Actually, probably not. But also, this maybe confirms, like you see how quickly LSU, after just being dead in the water for 7 innings, erased a 4-run lead and then took their own lead. So maybe that actually confirms that it was the right call with a big lead to go ahead and go to one of your top arms and say, look, we're not giving them any life whatsoever. And, for Carolina, this is it's a hurdle. It's a blip. You hope it's just a blip.
Sure.
And something that you'll kind of look back on and be like, it was a missed opportunity, but it doesn't really cost us. If Carolina loses the SEC by 1 game,
you're going to point to this one.
You're going to point to this one, and you're potentially going to point to the fact that you're going to play 29 SEC games instead of 30.
Yeah, in the latest D1 baseball rankings, LSU still number 1. South Carolina still sitting at number 6, so no real change there. Now the next 2 conference opponents you have coming up in Vanderbilt and Florida are sitting at, I believe, 3 and 4 respectively right now. So it's not going to get any easier over these next couple weeks. You have the midweek game against USC Upstate coming tomorrow. You obviously can't overlook that, but we keep saying we're going to keep learning more and more about this team as the season goes along, and I think this weekend we learned that, they can hang in there with the best of the best.
You surprised LSU still won?
I feel like that's kind of one of those things where a lot of people that vote on these things don't watch every single game or every single inning. They just kind of glance at the scores like, they split the series 1-1. But, I understand your point that if you really looked at this, South Carolina kept them in check for 16 of the 18 innings, where, maybe if you watch both these games, you might slide them down a spot or two. But I imagine the national perception is, they split 1-1. We'll keep them at number 1
on the road in the SEC.
Exactly.
Against according to their own rankings, if you're looking at D1 baseball, the number 6 team in the country. So, you probably look at, it's not deserving to drop. But I'm looking, Vanderbilt, I think Vanderbilt makes a pretty strong case for number 1 itself, but I think you're also, maybe you're splitting hairs at this point. The top 6 teams in the country, 5 of them are from the SEC.
Yep, and you're gonna have to see that Arkansas team not too long down the road either.
It's really actually absurd how difficult the schedule is at this point. Wake Forest sitting in there at number 2, the only non-SEC team. Virginia's 7. So SEC or ACC for the entire top 7 in D1 baseball's rankings. And, I think that's the other reason it probably stings a little bit, Tyler, is that you're going to play out these games against some really, really good opponents. You could not have you could play pretty well and not have a great record in some of these games coming up. So you want to win. Maybe this is Captain Obvious, but you want to win every opportunity that you have and take advantage of every opportunity that you have, just because you don't know what game you're going to have coming up or what stretch you're going to have, because we know how baseball is.
Yeah.
Look, you're talking about the Braves earlier. They start 6-1, one of the best starts in years, and then they drop 3 in a row, and they're right back down, to 6-4. So baseball has a way of evening out.
Yeah.
And in some ways, though, if you went back, Carolina's probably stolen a game or two. That was so this LSU loss was probably just baseball evening out from 2 of those wins. But yeah, the fact that it was there for the taking, and that you've got tough, because Vandy's at Vandy, right?
Yeah, they're in Nashville.
You could play 3 great games.
Yep.
And get swept.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and when you look at, just playing the caliber of opponents, I mentioned Arkansas coming up a little bit later down the road. One of these series is probably going to go rougher than the other ones. And then you're left wondering, man, is this team bad or what's going on here? But again, like you said, that's just kind of baseball evening itself out, and you run into those kind of things. The most important thing is staying above that 500 line in the conference, because at the end of the day, that's usually what dictates where you're going to be as far as the postseason goes.
And I think there are some concerns as the injury situation kind of mounts on you.
Yep.
And, didn't sound particularly positive as far as what Kingston said about Noah Hall.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it, man. He really was your best pitcher for most of the year. So now they have the depth that they can sort of cover this right now.
Right.
But I think this puts even more pressure on Will Sanders to be the guy you thought he was coming in than there would have been otherwise.
Right, and obviously you didn't have to address that third game with it getting rained out over the weekend. You moved Mahoney up to that second game that ended up getting played on Friday. And there is weather in the forecast for Vanderbilt this weekend, but should you end up playing all three of those games, you're going to have to address that at some point, assuming that Noah Hall isn't ready to go this weekend.
Yeah, I don't know what direction you can go with that. It sure seems like maybe, I guess, Matthew Becker or Eli Jones, who obviously, Jones started the game at Mississippi State, that, when you had to fill a role. So you would think, I would guess, it would be one of those guys.
Sure.
Jerzenbeck's probably in the conversation, but he's primarily come out of the pen. So maybe, I don't know, those three guys are probably the three you're looking at.
Right. This week is the last week of spring practice for the football team. We'll have the spring game coming up for you on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. We'll jump into that a little bit more on the other side. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. It's the final week of spring practice. Today is Monday. That means it's Meatball Monday over at Firehouse Subs.
It is Meatball Monday, and I would encourage everyone to go out there. If you are starting to get hungry for lunch, hit that Rapid Rescue. You can do that on the Firehouse Subs app, or you can go to firehousesubs.com and hit the Rapid Rescue button on there. Meatball Monday means you can get a medium meatball sub for just $7.99. Firehouse Subs has a sub of the day for every single day of the week, including Saturday, which is when the spring game is, and Sunday. Again, we appreciate Firehouse Subs being our presenting sponsor right here on the GC Takeover Hour. And go check out their new sub as well. I've seen, Tyler, they've started to push this on social media and on the website as well. The smoking triple stack with 3 meats, slaw, some barbecue sauce, and one of those 3 meats is their brisket, which the brisket sandwich is actually currently in my ever-changing, rotating list of favorites. It is my favorite, so triple stack up there as well.
Definitely have to check that out. As I mentioned, it is the last week of spring practice, culminating with the spring game coming up Saturday night at 7 o'clock, and we'll have tons of coverage for you all week long, including on Saturday right here on 107.5 The Game. As we kind of talked about last week, and Shane Beamer had his media availability last week where you kind of felt like all the questions had been asked up to this point. Is there anything that you're still looking for answers for in this last week of practice?
Yeah, I think you do sort of get to the point where a lot of your spring questions are not going to be answered in the spring. Like, I think you get indications, right? I feel like you're always looking for indications, but there's still, even if a guy wins the job, there's still the entire summer, then preseason camp as well. So you don't actually get final answers in the spring, but there are some spots I think you're still paying attention to. The beauty of the spring game is that if guys are healthy, you at least get an idea of what players are on the 2 deep. Now, you maybe still don't even know exactly what order they're in, but in the way the teams are split up, and I'm assuming South Carolina's going to do like they did last year and do a true 2-team split. We've seen in the past sometimes teams have had to basically not play a real 2-team split because they didn't have enough depth. Last year, Carolina did that, and what that did was, okay, let's take the easy example. If Rattler's your starter on one team and Luke Doty's your starter on the other, you know those are the top two.
Sure.
Your two starting defensive ends / Carolina calls them edge guys. Your two starting edges, so 4 players, that's kind of your two deep. Even if you don't know exactly what order, you can kind of, it almost confirms, because they, of course, don't do the depth chart, as we know. It confirms, if you have 2 starting spots, it confirms who the 4 players are, for those 2 spots, assuming everybody's healthy. So it'll be interesting to see. They're also very conservative, I feel like, about not forcing guys into action if they're banged up at all. I would imagine the secondary, you're going to see some guys out there, frankly, that are not going to play much for Carolina in 2023. Once they start getting even past the first group, you're talking about, again, having to fill 4 spots after Eamon Worry, after DQ Smith. Lots of freshmen probably get reps, at those positions. But, maybe we learn a little bit more about the O-line. Maybe we learn a little bit more about maybe some of those backup spots. I feel like, who's next up? By the way, we're supposed to have Tanner Bailey as our Garnet Trust interview for tomorrow. So check that out at 10 o'clock. But is Tanner Bailey the third quarterback?
Right.
Has Lenora Sellers made a push? I think watching some of these freshmen actually go play and young guys go play on Saturday, to me, is one of the coolest parts about the spring game, is you get a little preview of some of your backup and third string spots, but also a little preview of kind of the future of your program when you have some highly rated guys who maybe aren't quite in line to start this year, but could make big impacts in the coming years.
Now, I know you may have mentioned it just a second ago. Do we know if we're doing the exact same format for the spring game as we did last year?
We don't know for sure. I would think that they have the numbers to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So, between walk-ons and scholarship guys, they should be able to do that, but they have not explicitly said that that's what they're going to do this year.
Gotcha. And we've talked about several different position groups, edge, running back, obviously center. What specific one are you most excited to see for Saturday?
It's a good question. We've talked about running back and edge so much, and there's been such a spotlight on that. I don't know that we learn a whole lot new from that, except for maybe just getting to watch DK and Mario Anderson run at this level as running backs. I'm looking forward to that, but man, I'll go back to quarterbacks. I think you know what you have with Spencer and Luke, but how much progress has a Tanner Bailey made, and what does Lenora Sellers look like with a full spring under his belt? I think so. Fans and media alike, honestly, we get enamored with the guys who have off the chart traits. Sure. And, at quarterback especially, the big armed guy who can run, can throw it 65 yards and just makes everything look easy. Lenore's is that guy. He is that dude. So I think a lot of people will leave Saturday talking quite a bit about Lenora Sellers if he gets a lot of playing time. So that's probably the spot I'm most curious to watch is, first of all, who would be 3 and 4, which would be the 2 backups at the 2 split, squad groups. Who's behind Luke? Who's behind Spencer? My guess is it's probably Tanner Bailey and, I don't know. Will it be Lenora Sellers or will it be Gauthier or Braden Davis? That might be kind of a little telling thing to see there. But I think if Sellers gets a lot of PT, the fans will leave Saturday saying, man, that 16 has a future.
Well, everything I've read and everything that you guys have been talking about from what you've seen in practice so far certainly gets you excited. So I'm definitely excited to see what he does. And like you said, Tanner Bailey going to be in with us tomorrow for the Garnet Trust Hour. Get some insights from him on what's going on with that quarterback room as well.
Yeah, and by all indications, Tanner, a great dude. Looking forward to hearing some stories from him. I want to go back and talk about how he ended up at South Carolina because he was a late addition to South Carolina's class. interestingly enough, was actually the first quarterback offer for Carolina of the new staff when Beamer came in. A lot of us thought at the time he was going to end up at South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then he ends up committed to Oregon, and Carolina kind of moves on, does their thing at QB, and then, they had Braden Davis, they get Spencer Rattler, and then we hear, they've got another commitment. Quarterback's not even on our radar at that point. And we hear, Tanner Bailey's about to sign with South Carolina. We're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And so he was a potential early addition, ended up being a very late addition, and it is a guy who, doesn't have the big physical stature, the 65, 70-yard arm like Lenore Sellers, but, this kid was a heck of a quarterback in high school. So looking forward to hearing from him about kind of his journey to South Carolina, how the first year has been. He got to travel with the team late in the season last year, which generally, if you're the third, that's one of those kind of, I guess, indicators again, who's traveling with the team and who's not. And if a guy wasn't traveling, but then by the end of the year he is and is kind of playing that emergency quarterback role, that speaks, I think, to a coach's trust and to him kind of climbing this imaginary depth chart that doesn't exist. And so for Tanner, I think he had a good finish to the year. I'll be curious to see how much he plays in the spring game and his thoughts. I don't really think he's spoken much publicly. So
I don't believe so.
I don't think he's spoken this spring. So, what's the new offense look like?
Right.
We'll probably get the same answers we've gotten.
Yeah.
Everybody we've asked about the offense said the same thing. We'll probably get the same thing. But we'll try to get a little insight for Tanner. Again, great kid, great dude. Looking forward to hearing from him.
Again, that's coming up with the Garnet Trust Hour tomorrow. And speaking of journeys, several Gamecock women's basketball players getting set to take a journey to the next level with the WNBA draft coming up tonight. We'll talk a little bit about that next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you. WNBA draft coming up tonight. A lot of Gamecocks going to be involved in that. Before we jump into that, got to tell them about our friends and proud supporters of the show, Amy Mason Cup State Farm.
Yeah, I can promise you that Amy is in office more than Chris has been in studio the last couple of weeks. We're going to throw some shade at him since he's not here to protect himself. But Amy Mason Cup is a local South Carolina native and agent. Her and her team can give you a personalized quote to meet your needs and help you save. Amy Mason Cup is with State Farm right here in Columbia. You can give her a call, 803-772-5554. Her office is right off of I-26 at St. Andrews Road in Ashland Park Plaza. And if you need any help with your life insurance, any other type of insurance, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there for you. Again, that's Amy Mason Cup, 803-772-5554.
So, Wes, do you have a particular WNBA team that you favor over any of the others?
Yeah, Chris is the one that's not here.
Chris is the one that's not here.
I'm the one that's here in studio. No, I don't. I mean, honestly, I pretty much just follow the former South Carolina players and obviously hope that they do well. Other than that, I don't really have a rooting interest in the WNBA, nor do I in the actual NBA, either.
Right.
So, the short answer, no.
Well, you might end up being an Indiana Fever fan by the end of tonight because multiple mock drafts have at least 3 Gamecocks going to the Fever in the 3 rounds of tonight's WNBA draft. Obviously led off, of course, by Leah Boston at the number 1 pick. And again, mock drafts aren't always 100% correct, and one pick goes a different way, and suddenly it's all out of order. But as of right now, ESPN, CBS, a couple different outlets have Boston, Beal, and Zia Cook all going to the same team tonight.
Jeez. Well, yeah, I feel like if Gamecock fans are out there looking for a team in the WNBA,
there's one.
Then, there you go. I think that's an easy answer. Like you said, we'll see. I wonder how much behind the scenes access maybe That's an ESPN.
Yeah, ESPN tonight at 7 o'clock.
That mock draft.
Oh
is
yeah,
from
that
ESPN?
mock draft. I saw mock draft. ESPN and CBS also had pretty similar there. So yeah, there's a lot of
buzz.
Yeah,
then.
a lot of buzz there. And again, these mock drafts are never 100% correct, so that could certainly end up going a different way there. But 5 Gamecocks are projected to be drafted. For those not familiar, WNBA only has 3 rounds. They have 12 teams, so 36 total picks. And out of the 36 total picks, 5 are expected to be Gamecocks tonight.
And hopefully I'm correct in saying this, but you really want to make it into that first round, because in the WNBA, the way it's structured and the roster spots, a second or third round pick, like you would think, a second round pick, that's great.
Sure.
But actually there's no guarantee you're going to make a team. So you want to go in one of those top slots and sort of lock yourself into making those rosters. But, I'm curious to see, man. I mean, it seems like Zaya Cook has not been projected as high as my perception was on where she would probably go.
Right.
And, man, I think she can be a great pro, especially the way she played down the stretch.
Yep.
Her final year at South Carolina. Obviously, Boston, she's going to go 1. And I thought it was interesting, Tyler, what Dawn Staley said about the rules of the WNBA compared to the college rules. It sounds insane to say as good of a college career as she had.
Right.
But could she have an even better WNBA career than she did a college career? I mean, I think there's actually a case to be made for that. And then the other thing that would be cool, what's going to happen when you have like Aaliyah Boston squaring off with Asia Wilson? I mean, that's pretty awesome. I imagine
prove who's the best.
I imagine Dawn Staley will be side court for that.
Well, and that's great, promotion for your program. And given the fact that, again, we're expecting to have 5 Gamecocks drafted tonight. You mentioned Zaya Cook, and as of right now, she's being projected by a lot of mock drafts to go an early second round. She would be the second round pick of the Fever if she goes where she's projected. But again, things can change, and maybe she could hop in to the back half of that first round, being maybe the 11th or the 12th pick there. So be interesting to see what happens. But the mock drafts pretty much feel like the 3 solid first rounders are Boston, Beal, and Letisa Ami here.
Yeah, and again, just another example, not that you even need more examples, of Dawn Staley's program, just from start to finish. The recruiting side of it, the development side, on and off the court, developing, these young ladies as women, and then, of course, the professional side as well. Just another example of what a great program she has built and will continue to build, I believe.
And I brought this up earlier to Colin, who, by the way, he said if Aaliyah's not the number 1 pick tonight, he will spin the wheel of agony that's sitting over there in the corner of the studio on Wednesday when he comes back in here.
I mean, not exactly going out.
It's not
on a limb there, Colin.
But if something goes sideways, then we will certainly hold him to that. But we were talking about, now that you're replacing all these pieces, I got to imagine, and I haven't looked at a 2024 WNBA mock draft, but I got to imagine Camila Cardoso is being thought of pretty highly in next year's draft cycle by these, mock drafts.
You would think. I mean, I think she's set up to be a superstar next year. We talked about this right after the season ended. I think Carolina's probably going to, we'll see what they do in the portal. We'll see how the young players progress. I think they'll probably be a little bit more of a traditional structured team as far as the minutes and just not being quite as deep. And, your best players maybe have to kind of carry the team a little bit more. And I think Cardoso is probably your best returning player, even though she came off the bench this past season. So, yeah, I think even if she's not, which I'm sure she's probably already up there, but even if she's, outside of the top 5 right now, she's going to be, I think, moving up those mock drafts. I think she probably has a chance to go. I mean, I think she could go number 1, honestly, depending on what the need is. But certainly, I mean, what would it be? Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese? Are they probably?
Probably, you would think so. But again, it does kind of come down to what whoever has that number one team pick needs.
Yeah. But if you were just sort of projecting best players, Clark and Reese probably have the momentum right now, but Cardoso, I think, will shoot up draft boards, and I think will be top 3 this time next year.
Right. So, again, tonight's WNBA draft, 7 o'clock on ESPN, and expecting to hear a lot of Gamecocks get their names called. Tonight, we'll come back, wrap up the hour, and talk a little bit of Masters as John Rahm picked up his first Masters victory last night. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Then Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
I thought 8 was the key birdie. I didn't expect that bogey on 9. That was a couple of good swings I didn't expect. And then I had to get through aim corner, even par. That's what I was looking at. Obviously, Phil and Jordan were making birdies and finishing strong, and they were finishing their round as we were finishing 10. So making sure I, at the end, didn't put myself in a difficult spot on 10, 11, 12 was the key. And then 13 with that right to left wind is when I could turn a little bit and get in the attack, and that's what I did. So it's not really one moment, but if I had to pick one, I would say hitting that draw perfectly on 13 was the start of it.
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you for a few more minutes. That was the voice of 2023 Masters champion John Rahm yesterday, talking afterwards about the turning point for him on Sunday. Now, he entered Sunday 4 strokes behind Brooks Koepka. Now, they did have to end round 3 on Sunday because of weather, postponing it from Saturday. By the end of round 3, he was only 2 strokes behind, and then he steadily chipped away, cut by cut, into Brooks Koepka's lead before ultimately winning by 4 strokes over Koepka and Phil Mickelson. And I talked about this in the last hour. I think this tournament's going to be remembered more for Koepka's collapse more than Rahm's kind of masterful play on Sunday.
Yeah, probably so, and in some ways for the collapse of those trees as well. I mean, and by just the weather affecting everything. Not good golf weather by any means. That is insane to me that trees that big can be uprooted like that without having like tornado forced winds. Right, and honestly, looking at the videos, looked like something out of a movie. Sure, and a miracle that no one was serious. No one was seriously hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody was hurt from what we've said, have read at all, which is good, obviously, because those were huge trees.
Yeah. By the way, to tie it into South Carolina, did you see that not only Shane Beamer but also Hunter Beamer?
I did see that. Got to experience
the Masters.
Hunter's not afraid of the camera.
Hunter is living the life. His dad, of course, posted on Twitter, Hunter was decked out in his Masters garb, ready to go. Yep. Looked like he was about to participate in the Masters, I think, but apparently got to see and maybe get a glove or something from one of his favorite golfers as well. Mm-hmm. So, or got the tee, I think. Okay. But really cool. And I think Beamer was on with Marty for Marty and McGee. So
they had a lot of rain coverage to fill. I think that was on Friday.
Yeah. So yeah, cool moment for them, and always a little Gamecock connection here or there to that event.
Absolutely.
By the way, Tyler, to complete our thought from before, I did actually find a 2024 mock draft.
Okay.
This is from WBasketballblog.com.
All right.
I
don't know how legit that is, but okay.
But we're gonna give it.
Sure.
So we were missing Paige Beckers.
Ooh,
she is also strongly in the mix as a top 5 projected pick, and this one does not have Rakia Jackson, but she could have gone out this year.
Okay.
But she came back to Tennessee.
Gotcha.
And she's probably, this thing is actually loaded. So they have Caitlin Clark 1, Paige Beckers 2, Angel Reese 3,
all right,
Cameron Brink, who's the Stanford girl 4, and then Haley Van Lith, who is from Louisville, but is in the transfer portal.
That's right.
And could be going, there's rumors, could be going to LSU.
Yeah.
Potentially. So that's the top 5 right there. But they have Cardoso second round, which I'm telling you, zero chance that ends up being the case. That's more of an outside looking in.
Sure.
She's coming off the bench.
Exactly. She's going to be a starter next year. She's going to get seen by a lot more eyes, and I expect she's going to shoot well up that draft board by this time next year.
Yeah, the fact that it is such a loaded draft, will make it a little bit more difficult for her to navigate into that top 5. But I think she'll be in the conversation for top 5. And again, maybe even top 3, top 4. I guess at this point, it kind of depends on Cameron Brink and what people see of her next year and where she's projected. If you start looking at it from a standpoint of position. So, we'll see. But Brink, even a completely different player than Cardoso. She's 6'4", and just not, obviously, if you're looking for height and athleticism and ability to control the paint, then Cardoso is going to be, I believe, the best in the country next year at that.
Going back to what we were saying about potentially 3 Gamecocks joining the Indiana Fever, nameless texter hits us on the Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100, points out Destiny Henderson plays for the Indiana Fever, so even more South Carolina representation there.
Yeah, so they're just basically building WNBA South Carolina.
I feel like that happens like in the NFL. There are certain teams that just like pick from the same school constantly.
Yes.
And I guess that happens in the WNBA as well.
I feel like you kind of have that with the 49ers a little bit with South Carolina.
Yeah.
Taking Debo, taking Ken Law.
Yep.
Did they take somebody else?
The name's escaping
me. I'm drawing a blank. But the Niners have been very involved.
Yeah.
And I think the Niners have a couple of late third-round picks as well.
Yep.
That could be a spot for Darius Rush, potentially. By the way, speaking of mock drafts, the latest mock draft I saw from PFF,
right?
I guess from over the weekend, they had 3 South Carolina players, as you would expect, all going in kind of that top 100, top 3 rounds.
Right.
They actually had Cam Smith mid-second, and then they had Pickens and Rush both going in the 3rd round. Steelers drafting Cam Smith, Colts drafting Zach Pickens, and the Cowboys drafting Darius Rush. Again, but at that point, it's completely, entirely unpredictable.
Sure.
When you even start getting past the first 5 picks, I feel like, but at least gives you an idea of the general vicinity of where they're expected to be drafted, I think.
Right, and that draft coming up just a couple weeks from now that we've hit April, kind of hit the ground running with all that stuff, so very excited to see what happens there. In a couple weeks, as you mentioned, tomorrow we're going to have Tanner Bailey on the Garnet Trust Hour from 10 to 11, so excited for that, and be back tomorrow from 11 to 12 for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs right here on 107.5 The Game, halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next.